Have you ever really thought about why people light candles or leave flowers for those who've passed away? It feels like this universal human thing to do, right? But for Catholics, this act of remembrance is way more than just a gesture. It's an active form of help. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into the deep theological reason why. You see these gestures of love and memory all over the world. But inside Catholicism, especially on a day called All Souls Day, these actions have a totally different kind of weight. They're really rooted in this profound belief that our connection with people doesn't just end with death, and that we can still actively help those who've gone before us. Okay, so that brings us to the big question we're tackling today. To someone on the outside, it might seem, well, illogical. I mean, once a person has died, isn't their fate sealed? How could our prayers possibly change anything for them? Well, the answer is buried in some core beliefs that we really need to unpack. So our first stop is a specific day in the Catholic calendar that's dedicated to this exact practice, All Souls Day. Understanding this day is pretty much the key that unlocks the whole why behind praying for the dead. Every year on November 2nd, right after celebrating the saints who are already in heaven on All Saints' Day, the focus shifts. Catholics turn their attention to all the faithful departed. And that means those souls who are believed to be on the final leg of their journey to heaven. This day is all about helping them get there. And this whole idea really rests on this beautiful concept called the communion of saints. The belief is that the church isn't just the people here on earth. No, it's this vast interconnected family. You've got the church triumphant, those are the saints already in heaven. You have the church militant, that's us, living our faith here on earth. And then there's the church suffering, the souls being purified in purgatory. The key here is that these three groups aren't walled off from each other. They're all connected and can actually help one another out. Okay, so if the saints are in heaven and we're on earth, who exactly is in this church suffering that we're supposed to be praying for? This brings us to the absolute core reason for these prayers, a final purification that's often called the cleansing fire. This state is called purgatory, and it's so important to get this right. In Catholic teaching, this is not a mini hell, it's not a second chance. The best way to think of it is like a final rinse cycle. It's for souls who are already saved, they're already on their way to heaven, but they just need to be purified of any leftover imperfections before they can enter into God's perfect presence. And this isn't some fringe idea. The Church's official teaching, the Catechism, makes this crystal clear. As you can see from this quote, it stresses that these souls are already assured of their salvation. Their eternal destiny is locked in. This whole purification thing isn't about earning heaven, it's about achieving the holiness you need to fully enjoy it. So where does this really intense imagery of a cleansing fire come from? Well, it's drawn directly from the Bible. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, uses this exact metaphor. He talks about a person's life work being tested by fire, and that some will be saved, but only by passing as through fire. It's just a really powerful image of purification. So where do we come in? This is the crucial part. The belief is that our prayers, our sacrifices here on earth, can actually help these souls through their purification. One source used this fantastic analogy. Think of it like cheering for a marathon runner. Our prayers are like that final burst of encouragement that helps them push through that last, really difficult lap and finally cross the finish line into heaven. Okay, a totally fair question at this point is, where does this idea actually come from? Is it in the Bible, or is this something that was just invented later? To find out, we've got to look at the scriptural and historical roots. Well, people who uphold this practice will point to several key moments in the Bible. In the Old Testament, in the book of 2 Maccabees, you find soldiers literally praying for their fallen comrades. Then in the New Testament, you have the Apostle Paul praying for a man named Onesiphorus, who most scholars believe had already died. And you can go even further back to the book of Job and see Job making offerings for his children just in case they had sinned. So the precedent is definitely there. And look, this isn't just about interpreting a few verses. The historical trail is long and it's clear. The very earliest Christians were carving prayers for the dead onto their tombs in the catacombs. Centuries later, St. Augustine, who's a giant of Christian thought, wrote these incredibly moving passages about praying for his deceased mother. This was not some fringe idea. It was a deeply rooted tradition that eventually got formalized in the 10th century when November 2nd was officially set aside as All Souls Day. This belief in an ongoing connection after death, well, it also has some pretty profound implications for how the physical body is treated. It's not just about the soul, it's about the whole person.
The foundational belief here, the big idea, is the resurrection of the body. The teaching isn't that a soul just floats around forever. It's that at the end of time, our souls are going to be reunited with our own glorified, perfected bodies. And this one belief deeply shapes how the church insists our physical remains should be treated.
And that's why, for centuries, burial was the only option. It mirrors Christ's own burial, and it honors the body that's awaiting resurrection. Now, the church has allowed cremation since 1963, but it still strongly recommends burial. And the key condition for cremation is that it can't be chosen for reasons that deny the faith, like, for example, as the statement that death is the absolute final end. And even when cremation is chosen, the church has some very strict rules, and they're all based on respect. The cremated remains have to be treated with the exact same respect as a body. That's why they can't be scattered, or kept at home on a mantle, or divided up among family members. The belief is that the body is whole, so the remains have to be kept together and laid to rest in a sacred place, like a cemetery, to honor their sacred destiny. So after all this theology, what does this actually look like for Catholics today? I mean, how is this belief put into practice? The single most powerful way to pray for the dead, according to the Church, is to have a Mass offered for them. Pope Francis put it beautifully. He said that offering the Eucharist is the best spiritual help we can possibly give. And it's so powerful because it unites a personal prayer with the central act of worship for the entire global church. But it isn't only about the Mass. The practice takes a lot of different forms. It can be as simple as visiting a cemetery to clean up a grave and say a prayer. It can mean doing an act of charity or making a small sacrifice in a loved one's name. And of course, it includes just simple, personal prayers offered from the heart. One of the most famous and simple prayers is this one. It's short, it's direct, and it just perfectly captures the entire hope, asking God to grant eternal peace and light to the soul of the departed. It's a prayer that gets whispered in churches and at bedsides all over the world. In the end, this entire tradition, the belief in purgatory, the communion of saints, the prayers for our loved ones, it all hinges on the answer to a question posed by Jesus himself, not with complicated theology, but with this simple, profound claim right before he raised his friend Lazarus from the dead. He just said, "I am the resurrection and the life. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die." And then he asked a question that still echoes today. Do you believe this?